Yeah, a game that, in my opinion, was just totally off script. I didn't foresee hardly any of that happening. The way the game played out on both sides of the ball with both teams, just a totally different thing. What? What's going on here? I'm being attacked. I've been hit. Somebody threw a chair.
I knew there was going to be some level of shenanigans. Some level of shenanigans.
Get where's security?
He just can't help himself.
Get him out of here. Get him out of here.
For what it's worth, the Ole Miss administration people that were on the field were none too pleased with the stuff that was going on the field.
I could see some of them, and they were thanks to my accomplice over there. I appreciate that. I woke up this morning. I was like, is there a way I could have a chair thrown at me? I bet I could pull this off.
Dude, you're the biggest wrestling fan I know.
You throw a chair at you.
I know you would have. So, for State, it's just to be able to take a breath now. This last month of the season for State has been so tense since the Kentucky game, right? It's just been, God, what is Leach doing in the offense? And they're falling apart. And is this ever going to work? And blah, blah, blah. And now it's take a breath. You won 8 games. You're going to go to a good bowl game in Florida in all likelihood. You have a chance to win 9. You have a chance to finish in the top 25. And you can, it was frustrating, right? It's not been the prettiest football along the way, but you've gone from 4 wins to 7 wins to 8 and possibly 9. I mean, the man is getting improvement, and next year, what did I say back last spring? 2023 should be the big year in the cycle with the way the schedule sets up and everything. You got a real chance next year to have the special year that Ole Miss had a season ago for Mississippi State.
Hold on a second now. Stop looking ahead to next year. Today is your day to soak it in, to gloat a little bit if you'd like, to enjoy this moment because it's been a while since that trophy has resided in Starkville. Not a long time, but long enough for Mississippi State fans. You don't have to turn the page to next year just yet.
I'm not turning the page. No question. I got a little peripheral ahead. Yeah. For State, Leach had to have that game. We said that back in August. We said that back in June, July, that they had to win this. It didn't matter what your record was coming in. You had to win this game. I think Will Rogers had to have this game. 0-3 as the starter in an Egg Bowl, that's not something nobody wants to have. And he had his moments of good. He certainly had his moments of bad last night, but he got to hoist the trophy at the end of the game, and that's really all that matters. And now with Ole Miss, I mean, I don't know what kind of flux they're going to be in. I don't know. With Kiffin, I'm sure we're going to talk about it. We don't know if he's staying or going. I really don't have a read on it one way or the other. But it feels like, at least for a moment, Mississippi State, has a chance to have some momentum this offseason that they just didn't have a season ago. We'll see what it means for them in recruiting. We'll see what it means for them in the transfer portal. But right now, if you're a Mississippi State fan, you can look at the program and say, going in the right direction. And the last month you weren't able to say that, but this win, and I hate to put it all in one game, and it's the Egg Bowl. I hate that, but it kind of is what it is. State had to have this game, and they got it.
C-Spire text line. We're in one of those days where anything I say is going to be, it's going to be questioned. Like this. Been a while? It's only been 2 years, Richard. Hey, they're not my words. They're your boy Brian Haydad's words. He's talked like it's been 2 decades, not 2 years, since Mississippi State has had the trophy. He's the one that's been beating the drum for the entire season that Mike Leach had to win this game. And so I chose the words, it's been a while. Not really that long, but a while. So, yes, it's been a while. Congratulations. Don't worry about beating up on me. Just enjoy your win.
I bet the guy who sent that text is really fat.
Did you send it?
No. Oh, why? Why? Violence. I was just at your home.
How could he have typed that? I mean, you were watching him.
What am I doing here?
Mystical powers.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Oh,
So,
I didn't. You recognized the number. I did not recognize the number. It's a family tradition on this Friday afternoon. Oh, man.
Exactly.
Hey, we are glad to be with you. Let me throw this out, Borky. I'm curious. Like, I'm kind of having trouble making this make sense based on numbers. And the numbers I'm talking about are 0-0. And that was what the scoring was in the third quarter. But I thought Mississippi State won that football game in the third quarter. Am I crazy for saying a quarter in which no points were scored was the quarter in which Mississippi State won the game?
If you want to also add in that drive right at the end of the half as well for Mississippi State, I mean, almost had all the momentum right before that long drive to go in and really change the score. Obviously change the score, but change the way that the score felt going into halftime. But yeah, Ole Miss had 8 total yards in the third quarter? So something along those lines. That was when Zach Arnett and his group really pinned their ears back and just attacked Ole Miss and dominated up front. The number that's still blowing my mind, so State had 2 sacks in the game. Jackson Dart was really good at being elusive in the pocket. He was under duress basically the entire game. So 2 sacks. 15 tackles for loss for Mississippi State.
That's
15.
an insane stat.
Yeah, that's hard
really
to
is.
fathom. I mean, you don't do that against Middle Tennessee Tech. I mean, that is just a dominating performance from the front 6 of Mississippi State. Linebacker play especially was phenomenal last night for the Bulldogs. And yeah, I mean, they really shut down Ole Miss offensively and just allowed themselves to creep back into the game, overcame turnovers. So that's an interesting way to look at it.
So let me kind of explain what I mean, or at least try to explain what I mean. So it was 16-14 at the half, right? Mississippi State drives down, gets that touchdown. They turn a 16-7, so a 9-point deficit into a 2-point deficit. But listen to the numbers in the third quarter, and I thought Mississippi State changed their strategy. It was like Zach Arnett at halftime, pardon my semi-French, said, screw it, we're going after him. These were the third down numbers. Neither team scored. Mississippi State had 5 first downs. Ole Miss had 1. Mississippi State had 44 yards rushing in the third quarter. Ole Miss had 1. Mississippi State had 76 yards passing in the third quarter. Ole Miss had 14. 21 plays for 120 yards for Mississippi State. 11 plays for 15 yards. Time of possession in the third quarter, Mississippi State 10-28. Ole Miss 432. But again, I thought it was the approach and the mindset that Mississippi State brought out of the locker room where they said, we are going after Jackson Dart. Lane Kiffin actually talked about it in his postgame, and it was kind of a weird segue to get to the point that he was making. He made reference to the rumors about Mike Leach retiring after the game, and he said it was kind of like Zach Arnett coached like it. He said he was going 0 blitz in the middle of the field. That's not what they normally do. That's not something you really see, and it affected what we were trying to do. That was Lane Kiffin paraphrasing, talking about Mississippi State's defense in the second half. And, of course, the Bulldogs had the ball there at the end of the third quarter and then were able to kind of continue things into the What do you guys think? Should we go should we just continue to talk about the game or get C-Spire text line? Maybe go back to some text in a few minutes. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree.
All right. So we'll get some text
stay
in
on
a
the game.
minute.
There's a lot with the game to talk about.
All right, so let's do numbers. Let's start there. Mississippi State, 20 first downs, Ole Miss 19. The numbers were remarkably similar when you just look at the box score. Both teams ran 77 plays. Mississippi State, 77 plays for 336 yards. Ole Miss, 77 plays for 331 yards. Mississippi State punted 5 times. I think this matters, by the way. 5 punts last night for Mississippi State for an average of 47.2 yards. The net was 47.4. Coverage was great, and a nice job punting by Georgopoulos. Ole Miss punted it 4 times. They punted it 6 times. The average was 450. The net was 41.7, but there were still a couple of pretty decent returns in there, both on kickoffs and punts. Mississippi State, huge advantage in the return game. And field position kind of bared that out as the game went along last night. And that was something that I think we kind of expected to see going in.
In close games like this, it's a 2-point game. The tiniest little things matter, and State was significantly better than Ole Miss in special teams last night. Punter was better. Return game was better. There was that one running into the kicker, so even though that didn't really change anything because it didn't give Ole Miss a first down, other than that, special teams, huge advantage Mississippi State last night.
The
probably State's best special teams game of the year.
Yeah. The bright spot in special teams for Ole Miss, who was Jonathan Cruz. He was 3 for 3 with field goals from 32, 33, and 49 yards. But there's a problem there. 32-yard field goal, the opening drive of the game, instead of a touchdown after getting into the red zone. 33-yard field goal with 1:33 to go in the first quarter after once again getting into the red zone. The second quarter field goal was big, right? I mean, you get stopped and you hit the 49-yarder. That was a no doubt try to kick the field goal there in the game last night. But those first two, I mean, red zone issues continue. They've been an issue for Ole Miss for the entire month of November. Second half scoring has been an issue for Ole Miss basically all season, and those themes carried through in the game last night for the Rebels.
I'm still, from watching this game and going back, I've watched the highlights again and everything else, Richard. I'm just dumbfounded by how this game played out. I really couldn't believe it. The way State was able to limit the Ole Miss running game, I was not prepared for that. I really wasn't. The way that State ran the football, as you know, I talked about it all week. I had no faith in their ability or their desire to do it. I said today on the podcast, I'm not sure that the rain wasn't the MVP for Mississippi State, because I think that's kind of forced Mike Leach into a little bit more conservative style, a little bit more running the football. But it was so effective, and that's what's frustrating about watching Mississippi State is, when they run the ball, they can move it and they can score points. This is the most off-script Egg Bowl I can ever remember. I don't think anybody else who does, sports talk radio, anybody else who's a writer, predicted the Egg Bowl coming out like this. Close game, sure. State winning, yeah, why not? But just the way that it played out, I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around everything.
There's one thing, Borky, that kind of stands out in this. Ole Miss's defense was pretty good last night. They give up 24 points to Mississippi State, and they allow a total of, 300, we talked about it a second ago, 339 yards, 300 something.
Yeah, I mean, if you gave them Rodgers' numbers with 24 points and 3 turnovers, everybody and their brother would have taken that going into the game.
100%. But I guess what I was going to say was defense was good for basically the entire second half. They were good with the exception of bookend possessions in the first half. Ole Miss was awful defensively on Mississippi State's first offensive possession. State just methodically drove down the field, boom, 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 stick it in the end zone. And then on the last possession of the first half, there at the end of the second quarter, which was a huge turning point possession, I thought, for Mississippi State to make it a 2-point game, Mississippi State, once again, good time management, good use of the timeouts, boom, 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 methodically down the field. Biggest play on that drive for Mississippi State was 15 yards. There wasn't a chunk play on there where they ripped off 47 yards on one play. It was steady, methodical, mix of the run, mix of the pass, get it to receivers, maybe make a play in the open field. And it's like you look at Ole Miss and you're like, okay, what happened on those two drives? They got no pressure. Played basically nothing but 3-man front on those two drives, and when they did that, Mississippi State was patient in its offense and willing to take what Ole Miss gave them.
Yeah, but still, even at the end of the day, that was enough, or it should have been enough to win.
Agreed.
The drive before the end of the first half is where State won the game, in my opinion, because I thought Ole Miss had, when they scored to make it 16-7, I thought that they had taken control. I was just thinking, okay, this is going to be a long night for State. They can't do anything offensively. And Rodgers, to his credit, put together a really good drive and got them into the end zone, and that got the momentum back to Mississippi State's side, and they just held on to it the rest of the way. You mentioned the third quarter and no scoring in there, but State did, physically kind of take control of the game. But I feel like if they don't get points there at the end of the second quarter, there's no chance for them to win that game.
We got a question, and I think this is a very fair question on the C Spire text line. Do you think Ole Miss was overrated all season? 1-4 in the meat of their schedule, could easily have been 0 for their last 5. I would answer this way, and you guys tell me if you disagree. Was Ole Miss rated higher than what they actually were as a team? Yes, I would agree with that. But you have to do the rankings based on what happens as the season unfolds, and it kind of works itself out in the long run. I mean, the fact is, if you play 7 games and you don't lose your first 7 games of the year, and that's what Ole Miss did, there are going to be lots of other teams that lose games along the way. And as a result, just by the nature of the polls and the way the voters look at things, when you win games, you're going to be rated in a certain place. People aren't rating you when you're 7-0 going, well, but I think they're going to lose 4 of their last 5, and so as a result, I'm only going to rank them 23rd in the country. You can't do that when a team is 7-0. So was Ole Miss's ranking probably ahead of where they actually were as a team? Yes, I would agree with that. But I don't know that it's overrated in the sense of they really should have been placed somewhere else in the polls along the way. Does that make sense?
3 things can be true at once. We now know that the number 7 ranking that they achieved was way too high. I think it's also true that the schedule did get tougher. And I think it's also true that it was a distracted football team by the end, and they were not playing to the best of their capabilities. All 3 of those things, I think, are true at the exact same time.
Yeah, I mean, were they the 7th best team in the country? Clearly no. But at that point, there weren't, 10 teams that you were going to rank in front of them based on what had happened during the course of the season.
I'll give my answer when we come back.
Teaser.
Okay. Dale from the Delta says, I feel like when Green lit up Mingo over the middle at the beginning of the game, it set the tone. There were a lot of drops. I think you might be onto something there. Sports Talk. Because
they deserve it.
So, yeah, they absolutely do. And it was like there were a couple of guys I wanted to point out. And then I started looking at, the overall defensive numbers. DeCamerion Richardson, 10 tackles last night. Played a really good game. Bookie Watson, 10 tackles. Played a really good game. I didn't think Forbes was that big of a factor. I was a little surprised, honestly, to see that he had 9 tackles. I didn't think that he was he took one side of the field away, but he was fine. I thought Jet Johnson was phenomenal. I thought Jalen Green with that big hit early set the tempo. Yeah. That sack from Tyrus Wheat was big, and I thought, once again, he was in on 2 or 3 really important plays. Randy Charlton made the play that allowed us to move on to the next day. If he doesn't –
the immaculate deflection, too.
I'm telling you guys, I know there are a lot of people that didn't like that play call for whatever. If he does not get a fingertip on that ball, Jonathan Mingo can moonwalk into the end zone from 3 yards out because nobody's touching him. There's nobody there in a white jersey if he doesn't recognize. Now, I caught just Neil Price talking to Mike Leach after the ballgame. I caught a little bit of his interview, and Neil asked Coach Leach about that play in particular. He goes, he's like, I actually like that play a lot. He's like, that's something that we run. He's like, and we run it pretty well. And he said that may be part of the reason that we defended it well is because our guys see that all the time, and they give us heck when we try to run it in practice situations. I thought that was a really interesting but Mike Leach kind of was like, I loved the play call. We just made a play there. I know we got to go to break, so Randy Charlton makes a monster play there. Jaden Crumity was a monster on the defensive line. Davis was good on the defensive line. I thought Pickering played okay. Cam Young only had 2 tackles in the game last night. Cam Young wrecked Ole Miss in the middle of that defensive front last night. I mean, just a lot of guys that played really, really well for Mississippi State on that side. As the game was unfolding at the end last night, where had you guys gone in your minds? Was Ole Miss going to get the 2-point conversion? Did you think Ole Miss was going to score the touchdown on that last drive? If they scored the touchdown, did you think they were going to get 2? If they got 2, there was $1:25 left on the clock. Did you think Mississippi State was going to drive down and score again? Because I know you had played it forward in your head.
I was so dumbfounded by everything that had happened to that point. Now, it wasn't occurring to me that Ole Miss was running out of time. And then when they scored, I was like, okay, they'll go for 2 here and we'll have overtime. And then when they didn't get it, I was like, okay, they'll onside. I could never string enough thoughts together to have a feeling one or the other. We didn't talk about one of the big things in this game is Kiffin using 2 timeouts on the 2-point conversion. That effectively
ended the game.
It would have been difficult. It would have been difficult for Ole Miss to do anything with what they were going to have left, but that definitely ended the game for Ole Miss. I don't know that I've ever seen, call 1 timeout to make sure you got everything straight, sure.
Well,
but 2, this isn't college basketball where you have 8 timeouts. What are you doing?
But there was a little bit of a butterfly effect, right? So Lane Kiffin was frustrated that they didn't reset the play clock. He thought that it should have been, the whatever reset to the 25-second play clock. And so it was running down, and the reason he wanted so badly for the play clock to be set was they had the package in that they wanted and didn't want Mississippi State to have the opportunity to substitute there. So they took the timeout. They run the same package back out. Mississippi State made an adjustment to the look that they gave, did not like the play call that they had for the second deal, and subsequently took the second timeout. But, yeah, you can't burn 2 timeouts there because of the possibility that you might not get the 2-point. You really shouldn't take a timeout, period.
No.
There's no reason.
You got to have a play ready in that instance.
100%.
Right? Regardless of what the defense is doing, this is what we run on the 2-pointer.
Yeah, because the 3 and out.
I thought they'd go Wildcat there. I thought they'd snap it because that was working for them. They had run it a couple times successfully. They just snap it directly to Judkins.
Yeah. No, I completely. That was not good clock management there. I was, it was. I was like, okay, if Ole Miss ties this, they've left a lot of time. And can Mississippi State go down and get in field goal range to try and win it? And then will Massimo Biscardi make a field goal? And Mississippi State, who has had trouble at times with the kicking game, but it has really settled over the last 6 games. Will they win it with a field? I don't know. Just a lot of scenarios playing out, and none of them came to fruition. By the way, I hate to lay the ball sideways on the tee and try and kick a spinner for the onside kick. Why do we have to reinvent everything in the kicking game? I mean, it's kind of worked for 100 years.
I don't know. That onside kick, too, just straight to the MSU guy who swallowed it up, J.P. Purvis. Just a State special teams, they didn't miss last night. Everything they did,
it didn't go 10 yards, and there was no hop. It was just a spinner on the ground.
But at the same time, if you bobble that, it's a live ball. It's time to go. So good job by Purvis, to go down there and clean that up.
Game last night. And there was a lot of, similar on both sides. So Mississippi State turned it over 3 times. Ole Miss has 1 turnover in the game. But I don't think turnovers really ended up being. Somebody pointed out this earlier, and I wholeheartedly agree. The play that Tulu Griffin made to keep Mississippi State from having, ball, what was it, a strip sack, got away from Will Rogers, rolling around. Looks like Ole Miss got a chance to cover it. I think Otis Reese tried to scoop and score on that play, couldn't corral it, and you end up with Griffin covering it up. Now, Mississippi State had 3rd and forever, but they still had the ball. And that would have been – now, it would have taken Ole Miss capitalizing in the red zone, which they did not do very well last night. But Ole Miss would have had the ball at worst in field goal range after that turnover. But that was a really good play by Tulu Griffin to keep the possession there for Mississippi State. Big play.
That's one of the plays of the game. One of the plays of the game for sure. And think about look at that. Look at the stills of that and how Otis Reese is right on the ball. Tulu Griffin's 3 or 4 yards behind him, but he just makes an incredible burst to get there. That's a play that doesn't really show up in the box score as much. You just see it as loss of whatever, loss of 15. But it's absolutely a play that won the game for Mississippi State.
Kind of balanced out, but there were 2 massive coverage busts that led to touchdowns. Right, so the touchdown
touchdowns,
pass where Mississippi State had – who was it that caught that ball? That was
Ra Thomas.
Yeah, it was Rara. He gave like one little inside move and then just released straight up the field, and Miles Battle was covering him there. And clearly Battle thought that he had safety help over the top, and he was supposed to be covering the flat of the check down. I mean, didn't even give a bump to Thomas coming off the line, and he was able to haul it in. But then at the end of the game, almost the same thing, where Dalen Wade gave kind of a jab step toward the inside and then just released straight up the field. And, I mean, was backpedaling, just waiting on the ball to come down to him. It's one of those plays where you're going just catch it. Just catch the ball. Just catch it. It's like hanging up forever and won't come down. But it's kind of canceled each other out when it was all said and done. But, yeah, I mean, it was far from a perfect game for either team. I read somebody earlier kind of categorized it as Mississippi State at times was like, here, Ole Miss, take it. And Ole Miss was like, no, we're not going to take it. You take it. And Mississippi State ultimately took it when it was all said and done. But in fairness, it was the Mississippi State defense that did the taking. They took the number one rushing offense in the SEC at 270 yards per game and held them to 74 yards net rushing. 74 net. Now, Ole Miss gained 124 on the ground, but in terms of total yards, 74 for Ole Miss. And Mississippi State's net rushing yards were 97, but they had 166 gained. That's a lot of negative yardage on sacks, isn't it?
It's hilarious that, with the sacks, because Rodgers actually had 2 or 3 positive runs in this game, but he just took so many sacks. But we said on Wednesday's show we had the magic number, right?
54 yards.
Yeah. The magic number was 25 for carries for Marks and Johnson. What's the number? It's 26, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mississippi State in total had 38 rush attempts, 39 rush attempts. Yeah. 37.
So 26 carries for Marks and Johnson for, I think, 147 yards. That is the formula. That is the way for Mississippi State. That is how they win. They have to be willing to run the football like that every time out. And if they are, that's what opens up those little dump-offs over the middle to Wally and to Rufus Harvey that were helping to move the chains. And eventually it's what opens up to let Ra Thomas go deep and be wide open.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people, of course, it's social media and emotions and stuff, but people are getting at your podcast partner, Robbie, about things he said about the team earlier in the season. No, last night affirms why the criticism was valid. I don't understand people. It's what has been said about Mississippi State's offense under Mike Leach was affirmed last night. Because it's so frustrating when they don't do that and they lose games like at Kentucky when they refuse to run the football, which makes last night really good and also affirming the criticism before. Why can't both of those be true? I just don't understand some of that last night.
Well,
Shaq
a lot of
Bully,
it, people just are idiots. That's the main thing you have to remember.
Shaq Bully says, can you see if Kiffin stays at Ole Miss, him going for another quarterback in the offseason? Dart doesn't seem to be the effective passer that Kiffin likes.
What?
I get somebody said, did you watch the game? And it may have been Borky that responded there. And he says, yes, but that's one game. Don't you think they could have used a more prolific passer during the season to complement Judkins? I got news for you. Ole Miss needs a better offensive line, not a better quarterback.
Dude, I'll say this, and I believe this. If you switch quarterbacks last night and give State Dart and Ole Miss Rodgers, that game might have been like 4 or 5 touchdown victory for Mississippi State.
Dart was the significantly better
really well last night.
Under duress the entire game. 8 incompletions. 6 of them should have been catches. He was special last night.
I'd give you 2 anyway. And look, somebody mentioned earlier that hit that Jalen Green had on Jonathan Mingo early in the game and, what effect it had throughout the course of the game. All I know is there's one drop that was bigger than all the rest, and it was the kind of throw back across the middle to Mingo where if he catches that ball, he walks into the end zone. I mean, it was on an angle where he was going to split defenders and go into the end zone, and it would have been at a point of the game that would that have given Ole Miss Were they up
It was early enough in the
16
game,
to 7 at that point?
No, because State scored on the 16th right after this. They went to 16-7.
No, I was in the first half, though.
Oh, it would have made it 16-7 is what you're saying.
Well, maybe so. I don't remember where sequence-wise in the game it was. All
I
know is
think
it was a
Mingo
big,
was hearing footsteps
drop.
last night.
Yeah.
I think that you mentioned it earlier, that the hit from Jalen Green had him hearing footsteps the rest of the game.
Sports Talk.